Hey everyone, Justin Stivers, a certified financial planner, former estate planning attorney here, talking about where should my next dollar go? Most high earners don't really have an income problem. They have what we call a decision problem. The question I hear all the time is, where should, they don't say it this way, where should my next dollar go? Or, I've got this money. Should I save it? Should I invest it? Should I pay down some debt? Should I pay off my mortgage? Should I just leave it in cash? But there's some question around, I got this money or I'm receiving this money, what should I do with it? And what I see happen over and over again is that money ends up just sitting idle. It's getting deployed inefficiently, or it's just spread across too many different directions, and there's really not a clear plan for that money that they're talking about. So you've got money in checking, some in savings, maybe a brokerage account, maybe a retirement account, and each new dollar just kind of gets scattered amongst those accounts without any sort of real clear purpose. And so without a system, even a smart, high income professionals, they're going to make less than ideal decisions with that. So instead of guessing, what I want to do is I just kind of want to give you a very basic and simple framework that you could use when you have some extra money and you're thinking about how to allocate it. And think of it less as a one-time decision and more like an order of operations that you're just going to follow over and over again. So the first step is your foundation, right? Before you start thinking about investing or doing, anything more advanced, you really want to ask yourself, am I financially secure, right? And that can mean that's a big thing. It means a bunch of different things, right? But some of the big ticket items that we talk about is, do I have a very solid emergency fund? And I talk about this in a lot of other places, right? But something that could cover unexpected expenses or a disruption in income, right? You get laid off, something happens. Are you carrying any high interest debt that's working against you, right? So the most common that we see are credit card debts. Do you have very high interest debts that you're just, paying minimum balances on? Do you have the right insurances in place so that if something unexpected does happen, it can't completely derail your financial life? Now, there's not a one size fits all, but think of things like life insurance, like health insurance, like maybe disability insurance. There's a whole different host, umbrella policy, depending on the type of business you're in, different things like that. But are you secured with adequate and proper insurance? Right? Because if that foundation isn't solid, that's usually where your next dollar should go. And this is where I see a lot of people skip ahead. They want to invest, right? They want to optimize, they want to chase returns, but they haven't really taken care of some of the basics first. And when the basics aren't in place, everything else just becomes a lot more fragile because you're going to end up taking money that you invested to pay for some of those unintended or expenses that come up, right? Second step is what I call free money, right? Once your foundation is solid, the next question is, are you taking full advantage of opportunities that are essentially giving you an immediate return? The most common example of this is an employer retirement match program, something like a 401k, a 403b, something like that, right? If your company is matching a portion of your contributions, right, there's typically a return on that, right? There's typically an instant return on your money, something that's very hard to replicate anywhere else. And yet we see a lot of people either don't contribute enough to get the full match, or they're not really utilizing other benefits that are available to them. So before you start thinking about it and thinking about more complex strategies, just make sure that you're not leaving any obvious money on the table. And again, goes without saying, this is not financial advice, right? That situations are different. Each one's a little bit unique, but it's definitely something you want to take a look at if your employer has any sort of plan in place like that. So once you've got those first two handled, right? You've got your emergencies taken care of, that foundation level. You're not leaving money on the table. You move into the third step, which is an intentional allocation, right? So at this point, the question becomes, what is this dollar actually for? Because not all money should necessarily be treated the same. Some dollars are going to be meant for long-term growth, such as retirement, which could be decades down the road, where you can afford to take a little bit more risk and just let that magic of compounding interest do its thing. Some dollars are going to be a little bit more flexible, right? It might be money that you need over the next few years, where access and stability are going to be a lot more important than just maximizing returns. You can't afford necessarily to have the volatility of the market. And some dollars might be tied to a specific goal. This could be a down payment on a house, starting a business, paying for a wedding, funding a large purchase, where the time and the purpose of it is already earmarked. It's already well defined. So once you're clear on that purpose, the decision is going to become a lot easier because now you're not just asking where should this money go, you're actually aligning that dollar with a specific job. So another way to think about it is that if every dollar you have should have some type of role. If you don't assign a role to it, it's usually going to default to the least optional and efficient option, which is just probably sitting in cash, right? Some sort of checking, or hopefully at least a high yield saving, but I see it all the time just in a checking because you don't really have a clear reason or role where do you want to put that money. And again, sometimes holding cash is the right idea. Again, definitely with your emergency fund, and there may be other reasons as well, but it should be intentional and not just accidental. So an example, right? Someone's already got a strong foundation, they're getting their employer match, and they've come into some additional income, right? Maybe it's an inheritance or the selling of a property or something. One option is just to let that money build up in the savings account. Another option, step back and ask, what is this money for? What is this actually for? If it's long term, right? Maybe it does belong in a retirement account or invested for growth, right? Maybe we do open an IRA or contribute to an IRA or do a brokerage account or something. If it's a short term, maybe it stays a little bit more conservative. And if it's tied to a goal, right? Maybe it's dedicated to a specific bucket just for that purpose. Same dollar, but very different income or very different outcomes depending on how it's handled and what you want to do. And that's the key idea here, right? It's not about finding the perfect investment. It's not about optimizing every single decision. It's just having a very simple, repeatable system so that every dollar you earn or every dollar that comes in is being used intentionally. Because if you don't have a system, you're going to be very stressed out. So when you do have a system, you remove a lot of that stress and second guessing, like, should I spend money on this? What should I use this money for? I'm just going to keep it in cash because I don't really know where to put it. And you don't feel very comfortable. You don't really feel very comfortable with what you're doing. You're constantly wondering, am I doing the right thing with this? But instead, if you've got a process, you're just following the process. You're doing what you've already kind of set up. And over time, that consistency tends to matter a lot more than any one individual decision. So if you take anything away from this is start with the foundation, take advantage of those, obvious opportunities that might be available through your employer, and then be intentional about what you do with each dollar. And if you can do that consistently, you're going to be in a very strong position over time. So I hope you all found that useful.